Welcome back to the Yoga PodClass. So glad to have you here. Welcome back, Kirsten Phillips, the Boundaries Coach. Today we are talking about the sacred no and how that protects the body, how that no protects the nervous system, and how that no honors life force itself. As we begin, we're going to pause. Take that grounding deep inhale all the way in through the nose. Feeling it all the way down to the toes, the tips of your fingertips, the bridge of your nose. Following it by that long exhale, either through the nose or as if you're blowing out a candle. Welcoming your own presence. Kirsten, welcome back.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'm excited to be back.
Yes. So we talked about boundaries, a little bit about what we do. Both Kirsten is the boundaries coach and I am a trauma-informed somatic yoga instructor. And we walked through an energetic practice of boundaries in kind of our own boundary journeys. And today we're going to dive into the nuances of no as a complete sentence and why it's so important. In yoga philosophy, we talk about Ahimsa, which is non-harm. And when we have boundaries and we have the ability to vocalize our no meaning no and our yes meaning yes, that doesn't, we're honoring that part of not harming ourselves, respecting our own boundaries. Kirsten, what do you have to say? How many times a day do you say no, do you think?
Oh my goodness. Now a lot.
Yes.
But 10 to 15 years ago, not very often.
Okay. Do you want to tell us about that journey and how did you start learning to say no?
Yeah. Well, there's always been a part of me that said no, but it had always been when I was at the point of, complete burnout, complete overwhelm, like when I could no longer function. That's the only point I would ever say no, like in the past version of myself. And through my own boundaries journey, really, of figuring out, wait, how do I put boundaries in place? What are these? Like, what? Because I realized that was the thing I was missing so that I could feel, more balance in my life, more energy, all those things. And one of the key things with setting boundaries is being able to say no to the things that drain your energy. So now it's more of I give myself like a pause, really, and checking in, like, is this something I actually, want to do or not? And when I check in with myself, it's like, and I'm like, no, I don't, I'm too tired, or I've got too many things going on, or I just don't want to. Being able to say no is really powerful. And that's what I do now. Like, I will say no to things. So much so that a stranger recently was like, you say no a lot.
Yes. Oh, right? What a celebration.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually kind of a funny story. Can I share that story, Chelsea?
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So this was at the beginning of December, so not that long ago. I had a table at a holiday gift fair because I have journals and planners and bookmarks, and so I had all those fabulous things out on my table. And across from me was this amazing business that does these hand sewn like jackets and cloaks and like shawl things, and like all the fabric like comes from Africa. Like it's just, they're beautiful, like one of a kind pieces. And so I was looking at these like the whole time I'm at my table. It's like anytime there wouldn't be anyone, I'm like glancing out. I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. Like just beautiful to look at. And there was a woman that kept coming by and kept trying on the same cloak. Like she really, really wanted it, but she kept talking herself out of it. And she's like, oh, the armholes are too tight. And she was by my table and she said this. And I was like, well, you are wearing kind of a baggy sweater underneath. Like if you wore, a tighter fitting thing, And then she's like trying to argue me out of it. I'm like, okay, this is your thing. But then I somehow mentioned one of the jackets that I thought was really beautiful. She's like, oh, you should try it on. Like, let me bring it to you. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm at my table. I'm doing my thing right now. I don't need to try it on. Because I realized what she was doing, because she then basically pivoted towards anyone that was showing any interest in any of these cloaks. She was she was being like the cheerleader, encouraging everyone to buy one, but she wasn't buying the one that she really wanted. Because for whatever reason, she didn't think she was worth it or worthy of spending this money on herself. So she wanted everyone else to do it. And because I could see that, I'm like, I don't want my experience of trying on this cloak to be influenced by her needing to like deflect, her want desire type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept saying no anytime she was like, well, no, let me help you. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And I was like, I'd said no to her 3 or 4 times. And she's like, you say no a lot. And so I said back, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm the boundaries coach, like literally pointing at the sign like 2 feet from my head. And she's
Yes.
like, what? She hadn't even like looked at my table. She hadn't seen my sign. Like she didn't. I'm like, yeah, of course I'm saying no. Like I have really healthy boundaries around this. I don't like. So I mean, I didn't say it to her face, but in my head, I'm going, yeah, of course I'm going to say no. Like I want this to be my own experience to try on this cloak. I don't want it influenced by someone else's energy or like pushed to fulfill everyone else's needs when you're not taking care of your own stuff. So it was just this like kind of amazing example. And then what's funny is when the whole thing was ending, I did go over and I tried on the cloak I had an eye on, but I mean, I didn't love it on me, so I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
But I did try it on. So that was my recent experience with a stranger telling me I say no a lot.
Yes. Well, and allowing the no to be no. So even maybe for her, it was ultimately a no anyway. But for some reason, she kept going back to it. And I had to learn the difference between like convincing myself of something that I actually didn't want, right? Maybe there was other reasons that it was not meant for her or she didn't want it, but there was this little, well, maybe this, it's all speculation at this point, but really leads me into that honoring our no, right? If our no is no, let it be no. Don't have to like, oh, well, maybe this or no, no. And that is like slowing down to notice that
It's
hesitation. Yeah. Like
yeah,
you're gonna say something.
it's so true, Chelsea. No, I was just gonna say that it is so important, yeah, to actually honor the no and yeah, try not in convincing yourself you can be trying to do that either way, whether it's a yes or a no. But noticing, like Chelsea, that's so smart to be able to notice when you're trying to convince yourself one way or the other, when it's not genuine.
It, it's a subtle noticing, and our minds can kind of run the show. But when we can bring ourselves into that present embodiment, right? Are you guys still here? Are you still breathing? Are you still connected? What shows up in your body? This is a question for our listeners. When we talk about saying no, no, I don't want to do that. Is there something that pops in your mind that instantly comes up that you're like, yeah, I don't want to do that? What is that? That, right? Just a moment to reflect here. And then taking it that step further, if you say no to that thing that just popped into your mind when I said, oh, no, I don't want to do that, what does that give you permission to say yes to? And so neuroscience is catching up to what we've known from the ancient yogis, that when our boundaries are violated, it's going to affect our nervous system, taking us into that hypervigilance, that fight or flight, or that collapse, freeze, fawn. In your journey with setting boundaries and saying no, did you notice that nervous system shift? Was there a point that it became you had to overcome and actually vocalize your no when you meant no? Did you ever feel constricted there?
Yeah. I'd say like within my own boundary experience, I was more of a freezer. Like that was my primary response. And I had to, yeah, I had to figure that out of like, well, why do I keep freezing and like not saying the things I actually want to say or the things I want to do in these moments? And it was like opening up that curiosity was what helped me unravel and figure out, okay, well, what's really going on here? What is it that I need? But yeah, recognizing that freeze response and getting curious about it was what helped me the most.
And then taking that curiosity and turning it into the action. How did you feel after then you were able to vocalize, this is my no? So we're talking about that shift in the physiology, in sensation in your body when you were able to vocalize those no's, right? Those are victories, and they start small and they build up and add up over time. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So yeah, uh it's like I have to go back in time. And yeah, it's that because the freeze response was really what was showing up the most for me in my body of this kind of like hunkering in, trying to protect myself. And the more I got curious about it, like, why am I freezing? Or why can't I say the thing in the moment that I really want to say or do the thing I want to do? Like, really getting into that curiosity is when I started to get a little more curious about it, then I could sort of explore the body sensation more to the point like I know how to ask myself yes and no and how to hear the answer kind of like my body will squeeze or open or parts of it lift like there's a different sensation if I ask my and sometimes it's a really simple question because sometimes in the morning I'm like I love tea and I have a bazillion different types of tea to choose from and sometimes in the morning I'm like I don't know which one I want so I'll literally pick up the package and ask do I want this one and I'll let my body respond yes or no and then I'll pick up another one and like do I want this one yes or no and sometimes I have to like pick up 6 or 7 before I actually get to a yes or sometimes it's the first one so it's getting curious and like that awareness that body awareness because our bodies are so smart and they tell us things all the time.
Yeah. I'm familiar with asking your body, right? If anybody knows about muscle testing, right? Like your body will tell you what you want to know. And it's a way to bypass the conscious mind, which is ruled by our subconscious, but the conscious mind is operating in these like distortions of what we're telling it in the present moment, right? If you can take a minute to ask the body, right? What does it want in this moment? And it takes slowing down. I myself was dissociated from noticing that tightness, that rigidity, that stuckness. And then after I started to pay attention, right, realizing that my body was sending cues, it was sending those signals by noticing with my breath, where was that tightness? Where was that lock? Ooh, now I notice that shift. Someone just said something and I shifted, noticing that shift. Where before I would override that shift so often and ignore it that I just absorbed it. And then I held on to it. I didn't process it, likely shoved it in my junk drawer, what we say in yoga, right? Like, oh, I don't got time to deal with it. Maybe it's minuscule. You don't even think it's a big deal. So we minimize the boundary violation. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? When you can acknowledge it at least, like, ooh, that is the information. And it is a noticing from the body, felt sensational perspective and not letting the mind just override with an excuse of why that happened or some other story. Do you have to break any narratives for yourself in that pattern of quieting the mind to listen to what the body actually had to say?
I I didn't, but I think it was because I'd already been doing yoga. Because I started doing yoga when I was 18 or 19, and that really brought me into actually feeling my body sensations. So that meant then when I was, late 20s, early 30s, it's like I already had this general awareness and connection to what was going on, and then it was more like a fine tuning that I had to do, like to notice the smaller things, because I would say I was more aware of kind of like the bigger reactions, like my shoulders like going up to my ears, or but then it was like, oh
Mhm.
wait, there's like this little tension like in my low back and this like one tiny little spot, that getting that. And so I wouldn't say that there was a necessarily, yeah, any narratives for me in that. And I know for so many folks, like my clients included, that there are so many narratives. And for anyone, carrying trauma where you've disassociated from your body for safety, that can make it feel really, really scary to try to listen to anything happening in your body. So like that's, bringing in compassion and empathy for yourself, and starting really, really small, like really simple, small things, so that it feels less scary to be able to, yeah, break through that narrative and remind yourself that you're safe.
And being compassionate, that self compassion comes with awareness. And yeah, I know that oftentimes when I cue my new students, I will say, invitation to soften between the eyebrows. And it is in that moment that they realize how much tension they're actually holding, right? So then through awareness, you're like, oh, actually I am in pain. And you don't necessarily know, because we are in that samskara, that rut, that autopilot that gets us through day to day. So sometimes that stopping to find the awareness, it's not super pleasant, but in my experience with myself and others, it's so worth it, because what we resist persists, and it may just sound like, oh, that just fits really well together. It does, but it's also very true, right? It's going to keep presenting itself in layers. Even in the emotion code, we talk about how if you get an emotion that's not processed energetically and it gets lodged within your body system or energetics, emotional system, one of the layers of our being that we talk about in our koshas, it's going to throw us off, either energetically, physically, or emotionally. And what it does when it gets stuck in there is it acts as a beacon to radiate for more, say it's, frustration. And frustration's lodged in your shoulder, and it's energetically pulling more experiences to you that are frustrating. So it can feed that little energetic sticky point. So in the emotion code, we release those by acknowledging what's there, and we give that flow back. And I'll have clients say, wow, I'm actually so much more emotional, it seems. It's like, well, you're just more aware of your emotions versus just being on autopilot, numbing it out, staying in the status quo. And a lot of times, what we learn is we had to stop saying yes to so many things. And that sounds exciting. And that's like, okay. But that yes requires the magic word of no. Did you ever do like an inventory of all the things that you were doing in order to kind of like tease out what you wanted to be doing versus like maybe like a time audit? I've heard people talk about those.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think I consciously did, but I do a daily journaling practice. And in that, it was kind of like over time I basically would explore and notice, okay, where am I feeling like the most frustrated? Because that's usually a sign of something you don't want to be doing, or a person you don't want to be working with, like that frustration often is a sign. So yeah, instead of yeah, I'm like, I mean, there've been a few times where I've sat down and kind of looked at my weekly schedule to be like, I want to make my ideal schedule. And that has been informative also in realizing, oh, wait, I have these things I don't want to be doing, but these things I really want to be doing. And that
Mhm.
actually was how I put in that the daily journaling practice. So, yeah, I would say I didn't intentionally do like a time audit, but through my morning journaling practice, I ended up kind of noticing these different places where I felt frustrated and tuning into what's my ideal, day or week.
And how I correlate that and what I hear you saying is that that self-reflection. In yoga, we call it the svadhyaya, right? All the eight limbs, because it's not just about the physical movement.
So true, Chelsea. So true.
Avoidance is a common thread amongst humans, right? We avoid what we don't want to deal with, what we don't have time to deal with, or we don't think we have time to deal with, or we don't feel resourced or supported to deal with. Yeah, in reflection, I remember from one of my early teacher training classes at the Veteran Yoga Project, they talked about support precedes action. And when you have support and you are resourced, you then can take informed action, right? And be held in the space to come to that place and that centered, grounded, resolute step. And that's kind of where I got started with yoga and even trying to learn about how gratitude felt like in my body, right? Not just the icky things in our body, because we want to acknowledge those, but we also want to notice in our body what feels good. And really harnessing in on that. Our authentic yes, it actually requires 1,000 unseen no's, right? And when we say yes to the things that we don't want to actually be doing, and now this gets nuanced because there is such thing as discipline, right? Building those healthy habits, that takes work, and oh, maybe you don't want to be doing it. But this is that discernment and this is the boundaries. What is the boundary for you, right? If we are working on our belief system about who we are, because that's where change happens, right? If we believe we are the type of person to XYZ, we will align with the actions and steps, the yeses and the nos required to be who you are, right? If you have a desire to be different than where you are right now, you're not going to shame yourself out of it. You're going to honor the place and the desire of who that person is because they're waiting to be embodied fully in you and not suppressed, not pushed down by all of those yeses that maybe need a no. Do you have anything to add to that, Kirsten?
I love the kind of the comparison that you made right there, Chelsea, of yeah, the one yes and how many no's you have to make that aligned yes happen. Because I think because it's so easy to say yes to things because it feels good, to help someone or to be there for someone. But when you're doing that all the time, that means you're in that sort of service giving for them and no longer listening to yourself. So it's finding that difference, that nuance. Okay, where's the yes to the things I actually want to do, and where are the no's that I want to say so that I can experience myself and what I actually want.
What was the transition with and around you during the last 10 to 15 years as you've become the boundaries coach, right? And you've learned to say no so you can have your most authentic, excited yes. And I'm so excited to be a part of your excited yes because I do feel your genuine excitement and I have it too. It's like, yes, this is fun. I want to be saying yes to these things. So the questions are, where have I been overriding my nose in my body, not up here? And what would change if I trusted my body response no? So kind of a little riff for you, right? Like, what was that journey like from, becoming the person who froze and didn't really have that response to embodying and becoming and being the boundaries coach? Because I'm telling you, 10 to 15 years ago, the boundaries coach was already inside of you. right? She was there waiting to be expressed, right? Is that
Yeah.
right? You had to peel off the layers
Yeah.
to let her be and breathe. And look, here you are. I love it.
I thank you, Chelsea. Thank you. And like kind of the visual that hit me is that like when I went through my training to become a coach, part of that was defining our core values and then sort of the characters that make us up. And what I realized is, yeah, the boundaries coach, she basically was like a sleeping dragon inside of me that I didn't know was there. And so, yeah, you're right. It was a lot of, because I was, yeah, 10, 15 years ago, I was a really overly anxious person. And I didn't trust my own decisions. I didn't trust my own voice. Like everything I did, I was dependent on external validation or, those kinds of like reassurance. That's the word I was looking for. Validation and reassurance from outside was the only way I knew that I was like, oh, well, then I must be doing the right thing because someone else has told me that it's right.
Mhm.
So yeah, it took many things and time, but I think the most consistent thing was finding like teachers and people that could be more of like a mere reflection, and ask me questions that could help me discover what I actually wanted instead of giving me reassurance and validation by, telling me who I was. It was more of the reassurance and validation that you already are your own person. Like, what is it that you want? And that patience. So it kind of was, yeah, the right people kind of falling into my path. And a big part of that was going through my yoga teacher training. I'd say that was like, oh, like, and because it introduced me to people that thought very differently from the way I do. And that helped so much. Having a different perspective and realizing, oh, wait, not everyone is anxious, 24/7. Like, that there's another way I don't have to be in this like constant, like frozen to myself, kind of shaking almost feeling all the time.
Yeah. How
Right?
easy
That
to take
there's
that off, right?
yeah. Yeah, it was like I was encased in some sort of shell or something, like protecting me that I the kind of yeah, it was there's peeling off the layers. I think there are moments of kind of like breaking that shell, and some of it felt more gentle and more natural and other parts felt like a total struggle bus.
Yes.
There were times I
Yes.
didn't want to do the work.
Right.
Ah,
So in that subtle nuance right there, right? The times that you didn't want to do the work. So your mind would have been like saying no, but yet what was it that pulled you through to continue doing the work when you didn't want to do it?
yeah. I first want to acknowledge like that I basically was fighting with myself to get through that, because I want to say that out loud for anyone else that's either has tried or is trying to do this work, that there are days, weeks, could even feel like months that you're just fighting with yourself, and it can feel really impossible and debilitating. I also have, a history of depression in my family, so that can sometimes fall in too. And the things that got me through, again, it's finding the people that are actually there for me. Like, and there's like this subtle difference because we all have people in our lives that show up and are there, but they're not necessarily like the support. Like, there are folks in your life that often want you to be a particular way that they see you, and they're not open to you changing. So for me to get through those really big hurdles, I had to find the people that were there for me, but were also open to encouraging me to grow.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is by Cynthia Ocelli. And she talks about for a seed to achieve its greatest expression, its shell cracks, it comes completely undone. And to those who don't know what growth looks like, it would look like complete destruction. And it can be so confusing to the people around us when we're going through it. And you have to honor, right? That trust. What would change if we trusted it, right? Trusted that inner knowing in that decomposition that actually is growth. Growing pains as adults is real. It's so different, but I relate it to being a little kid and being like, oh, it hurts physically. And it can hurt physically. Oftentimes for me, it's in my heart, right? But it's spiritual growing pains. It's it's our character development and the self reflection, the svadhyaya, which we touched on. But she also said time. And kind of like an off the mat tip of creating space and time to practice being able to notice your freeze or fawn or immediate want to say yes and create space and time. Saying little things like, let me get back to you, or that doesn't work for me. And notice as I say those lines, how that feels on your nervous system. And if you imagine yourself saying that, or I need a moment, let me check, right? What's it like to give yourself the permission? Because I promise you, nobody else is going to. Maybe your boundaries coach, maybe Chelsea, and other people that are on this line of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in your everyday life where it becomes, not just an idea, but practical application, how to create that time and space, right? Take that breath in, notice, and allow yourself to maybe be clunky through it for a few times, right? Permission to not be perfect.
Yes.
You don't owe anyone your immediacy. You owe yourself your integrity.
That's
Checking in with
beautiful.
your breath. Yeah. And just noticing what's it like to try on saying no. What's it like to try the pause? And if we return back to, if you were here on our first episode where we kind of tapped in, dropped into our energetic bubble, this filtration system, our boundary, right? And think again about all the things that you want to say no to. And you can write them down or verbalize them right now. Like, absolutely no more of this. What is your this? Letting that be your filter energetically around your body and your being. Thanking yourself for showing up to notice, to reflect, to let us be little mirrors for you of these are questions we've asked ourselves or somebody else asked us. We're not reinventing anything, right? We're just like passing the information along. And we each find our own niche in doing so. And with that, I want to give Kirsten a little bit of time here. Will you tell us again, what is it that you're doing? How do we work with you? How do we follow you? I'm sure you're on the socials, but give us your 2 to 3 minute. This is who I am. This is why you want to work with Kirsten Phillips, the boundaries coach, because this is what you're gonna get. Let's hear it, please.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, so I'm Kirsten Phillips, the boundaries coach, and I help exhausted humans learn how to say no and to set healthy boundaries without the guilt. And the main ways that I work with folks, I do private coaching. I have a group program that'll be starting in February that's called Boundaries and Balance. And that's a really good one, especially if you're newer to boundaries or you want to really strengthen them. And I also have a weekly journaling group called Community, where we journal together. And my members say it's better than therapy. So I'm like, that's awesome. I love and always am excited to show up and do that. Yeah, so the best ways to find me, I am on social. Instagram's usually the best one. Love and Live Wellness is my handle there. You can go to my website, loveandlivewellness.com. I'm also on LinkedIn a little bit, So, you can find me, Kirsten Phillips, and it's Kerstin, and Phillips with two L's.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Before we close, I do want to invite to just a breath practice, inviting you to soften your gaze or perhaps close your eyes if that feels safe or comfortable to you right now. And imagining this sacred no, not as a wall, but as a shoreline. It lets the right things reach you and keeps what harms you from entering. Noting that taking this time to set the boundary with your breath and your intentional awareness will have practical implications in your daily life. Thank yourself for showing up to this practice today. We thank you for showing up to practice with us today. And thanking your body for carrying you through all that it has. Staying in this space for as long or as little as your day allows. Bringing your awareness back to the room around you when you are ready and only when you are ready. And taking that last sensational notice through the body. Noticing what's come up for you. And oftentimes, even if it was things like frustration, that was one of the ones that kept coming up. Has it shifted? Has your awareness or your acknowledgement of it perhaps invited a softening? Kirsten, do you have any final closing remarks about saying no, practical life tips that you would want to leave with our listeners today?
Oh, absolutely. And you touched on this a bit before, Chelsea, and that's the giving yourself permission to mess up. Because this, especially if you haven't done this before, it can feel really, really challenging. So choose like tiny things to start with first. And I love your suggestions of if someone's asking you to do something, yeah, simply say, can I get back to you? Or give me a few minutes. Having that little mini pause is absolutely life changing. So I'd lean into like memorize those two little lines and bring them into your life. And it's going to make such a huge difference.
Yeah, she's right. Taking the time to notice matters. And that's where the work begins. Because if we are constantly overriding, and it still happens to me, I will say yes to something before I check my calendar. Oh, do I actually have time for that? Right? And my excitement is because we're leading into our next conversation about yes, right? And when we say no in alignment with our values, then we are able to say yes to the things that give us excitement, that bring us joy, that are in alignment with our greatest and highest good. And I just thank you so much for continuing this conversation with me. As you all know, I'm Chelsea Lael Kennedy with the Yoga PodClass. You can find me at CLAEL11, or I'm on Facebook. Got to dig for a little bit there. I got a group. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Right now, I'm still in the Oceans of You. I would love to have you there. It is a self-paced but group dynamic container. And one of the things that I love that Kirsten has is the groups, because that opportunity we grow better together. And when you kind of know other people are in the suck of it, right? Because like I said, it's not all fun. Kirsten said it, it's not all fun. It can feel like that refinement is a little bit rough or sandpapery. Lean into it. I invite you to. Lean into the things that are maybe a little bit uncomfortable, the things that maybe you avoid, and learn the difference between what is an aligned no and what is an avoidance no. And we just invite you into our spaces. Like, what resonates with you? where you can practice trying on that information, right? You're going to be working with other people that are at the same or even different levels as you, because we're all at different perspectives. But Kirsten mentioned it too, right? When she had the opportunity to be introduced to different points of view that challenged her status quo, gave her insight into her self awareness, gave her the space to explore those questions, have that curiosity, or even know to be curious in the first place. We invite you back next week for our Sacred Yes. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. We love to shape these conversations based off of what's happening in our real practices with clients, because one of the things I know that's exciting about this work is that it's so layered and nuanced. And when clients come to us, it's usually in waves, and we find ourselves saying the same thing a little bit on autopilot. So when we get that group collective in that wave that says, hey, this is where we're at, let's ride this wave up and out together. So, I've got that oceans of you, so I'm always about that tidal waves. That's eel in itself, but it's just more pleasant, I think. How do you feel about your group containers? What do you see when you bring in a collective that's like shared interest in development, for you specifically, boundaries?
It's like the magic ingredient,
Yeah.
because I see it as the growth, one-on-one is amazing, but when you have all of these other folks that are going through it too, it's like everyone gets to grow exponentially together. And I'm always blown away because I always learn too. I mean, that's part of why I love leading any kind of program, because I'm always learning alongside. There's something that's going to spark for me, as well as everyone that's participating. So we're all growing, we're all learning, and we're all becoming that, like, shedding that layer, or maybe a few layers depending on where we're at, and coming into this new version of us.
Yeah, we grow through what we go through. And one of the other parts that I love about the dynamics of group containers, again, is the diversity. When I see somebody who is further along in the journey than me, it gives me that mirror neuron effect, right? Like, well, okay, yeah, that's what that looks like. Oh, okay, she's embodying it. She's got it, right? And monkey see, monkey do. Mirror neurons are a real thing. But then also, when I look at where someone is just starting, it does two things. It invites more self compassion for me when I was in that state, which I probably wasn't giving myself right when I entered, right? Very hard on myself, not a lot of self compassion. But the more that I've grown and reflected, I've grown in my own self compassion, which then becomes even more like authentic compassion for others versus that like martyrdom, I have to help you, I have to fix you, let me abandon myself to help you type energy, right? Where we're rooted and grounded, present, and then we model that behavior for other people. And we're in this ebb and flow of seeing and being seen in both our vulnerability in the middle of the growth, which is often looks pretty vulnerable, but even in the blooming and the blossoming, right? And learning to celebrate those who are blooming and blossoming, even when we're still in the trenches, right? There's beauty there. So, my invitation this week is, where can you say no? And how can you say no? Yeah. Do you have
Yes.
anything left in closing? I think I'm complete.
I'm excited for our continued conversation.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste.